Okay, guys, today we're going to talk about domain and range and what that means. So your domain is going to be your inputs or your X values. And range is going to be your outputs. So if you look at a graph, we'll look at this first one and we want to find the domain of this first graph. I would take all the X values that it hits. So it hits at -4, it hits at -3, it hits at -1, and it hits at 2. I do not need to duplicate it. That would be my domain because that's all the X values that it hits. So that would be my domain. If I was looking at the range, let's say I want to see what the range is. I'm going to talk about what Y values it hits. So again, I'm going to look here. It hits at 0. It hits at +1. There's a point with a Y value of +2. There's a point with a Y value of +3 and +4. So my range would be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you may have a graph that looks like this, where it's just a straight line. We see that a lot, right? So, whoops. So we have something like this. I want to know what X values or what the domain is. So that's all my inputs are the X values that it hits. If you take a look at this line, I want you to notice that it has arrows on both ends and it's going on and on forever. Over time, this line would eventually hit all X values. So the domain here would be all real numbers because it will hit every real number there is. Okay? And if we're talking about range, we're talking about the Y values. So again, since there's arrows on both ends, it's going to continue to go on and on forever. It's eventually going to hit all Y values. So that would also be all real numbers. Now, if we want to take, I'm going to show you a different graph. So let's say I have a different line, and let's say maybe it looks like this. And we're just going to go to here. There aren't arrows on the end, so it just looks like this. Okay? So if I'm talking about the domain, again, what X values it hits. So you can see it starts at 0. Let me make that a different color. It starts at 0 and it ends at 5. It touches all of these X values in between. I would say the domain is between, oh, sorry, let me write it in black. The domain is between 0 and 5, or including 0 and 5, or I could write it like this. The domain is between 0 and 5. So my X values are between 0 and 5. If I want to talk about the range, I'm going to say, well, the range is going to hit the Y values, and you can see that it starts at 3 and it goes to 6. So the range falls between, oh, I'm going to do it this way, sorry. The range is between 3 and 6, okay? Or I could put Y there. The Y values are between 3 and 6. Okay, that's what my range would be. Now, moving over, if we look over at points, the domain would just be our X values. So the domain for this coordinate pair, so I'm going to get rid of this part right here so we don't confuse it. They're not together. That was just different examples. So right now, I'm looking at the points here. And so the domain would be 2, 6, and 8 because those are my X values. Okay? The range would be my Y values, 4, 8, 12. And I would just list them just like that. If I had a table and I wanted domain, I would take all my X values. So the domain would equal 0, 1, and 2. And the range would be my Y values, and that would be 3, 4, and 5. Or so domain inputs, X values, those are interchangeable, and range outputs, Y values, those are interchangeable. And that's how we do domain and range.